Welcome to the Future Proof Leader. I'm Jessica Raypatch, CEO of Twin Legacy Solutions. And today I'm excited to have Peter Swimm, the founder or mayor of Toilville. Love that, Peter.
Thank you.
Welcome to the podcast. Really appreciate you coming on. Can we kick it off by just you telling us a little bit about your company and what you do?
Sh- Sure. Toyville is kind of a boutique consultancy. My role for the last 25 or 30 years in tech has been kind of like a rubber hits the road type technologist. So I worked primarily historically in something called conversational AI, which is now just regular AI. And the idea being that people should be able to talk to computers the way you and I are talking right now. And that means a lot of things, to a lot of different people, and it's constantly evolving and changing. In the last 3 years, it's changing almost every day. And so I try to help small businesses, clients, Fortune 5s, figure out what is the safe bets, what is like things you should invest time in for the future, and how to use these things today so you satisfy your FOMO without getting caught in snake oil.
So you're making AI more conversational.
Yeah, we make AI more conversational. We make AI in hands of the people who know the domain, and we make sure that you maintain your authentic voice and you don't become slop.
Well, that sounds amazing. Now, talking about slop, our topic today is stop automating your bad processes. I love this, and this is actually a common trend across the agencies and across the industries right now. So let's just dive right into the most obvious question I can ask you right now is why do you think so many companies rush into AI before fixing their fundamental problems?
Because they think the AI will magically fix the problems because they were told that. So AI, historically AI, when we thought about AI, we thought about movies like The Matrix and, intelligent, thoughtful things. And the AI that we have now is basically pattern matching. And it's pretty comprehensive pattern matching, especially if you happen to have a use case that's very common, like picking up a phone call at a business or writing a business email. And so the demos go very well. And you can make a demo go really cleanly and show, wow, that's great. And the minute it talks to something that is out of left field or a person with non-California English or any number of scenarios, it goes sideways. And so we see a lot of projects where they have amazing demos, like mic drop on the stage at Apple demos, and it can never get above 85% quality. And 85% quality is like what people are judged against, that, the metrics of their job. And so I, as a person who's not selling AI, like I don't get any money from compute, and I'm talking like, okay, what is the problem you're really trying to solve? Do you want to replace all the people at your company with little robot versions, or do you want them to be happy and employed and work on the things that make you special as an agency or company, and not work on things that are drudgery and things that are like problems you've made? So when we talk about don't automate AI, don't automate your bad processes. I have a lot of people that want to automate a process like we get an email and I take the email and I send it to Salesforce and Salesforce does something and I send it to Notion and then in Slack we get approved. And it's just like, why do you need those 5 vendors to file an email into your filing system? And
Yeah.
so what can we do to uh, cut down your bill first? And we use AI, and even if the AI is not like in the runtime, it's just used to offer the solution. We use it to get rid of this like mousetrap of like of all these things that you have in your business, so you can spend email goes right into my thing and it gets vetted and it goes to the right department and the right person, and then it's staff ranked. So the most important person's right at the top in the morning, and then I read it and I say, no, that's wrong, and I send it to the bottom of the pile, right? And so that is way better solution than having AI plan your day for you, right? Because you just need your brain is 500,000 years of evolution and pattern matching, and you are the expert in the world at what you do, and you just need all the facts in front of you. You don't need to have, bad summaries and all that. So just give me the facts of the important things and get rid of all the memes and forwarded emails and fake news and all that stuff out of my inbox.
Yeah, and you've worked with a lot of companies. I was looking you up a little bit. And have you ever seen someone take AI and actually make their processes much worse?
Often, I worked with an Australian bank last year, and they were doing a great job because they were setting up an agent. They wanted to make the voice bot to be the communication version of what an ATM is. So why do ATMs work? because I just need 20 bucks. I don't need to wait in line. So I'm going to go to the machine and get the 20 bucks. Why do I need to talk to a teller? Some of the questions are, yes, you absolutely need to talk to a teller, right? You need to go in there and they unravel your financial situation. But a lot of times it's just like, I need to get a copy of a form, or I need to find this, or the office hours or whatever. And so they were designing a really good solution. And then every 3 or 4 weeks it came back, we have to do complete containment. And in contact centers, containment is the metric. They know every phone call that you talk to a person costs like $5 a phone call. And so they multiply it times 200 people times the 200 phone calls a day. And so they know, like, if we can reduce the phone volume by this much, we'll save this much money. And so containment becomes like their KPI. And I kept saying to them, until you're 100% sure that funnel can separate the wheat from the chaff, you still need to have a person somewhere in the mix. And so what the bank did, and this person who was not in the meetings ended up doing, was shipping the automation, firing the unionized contact center employees in Australia, moving the contact center overseas to Indonesia. And then the CEO next week was pulled in front of the Australian government body that's like US Congress and forced to testify to why he thinks he can violate Australian labor law. And so that was like a real FAFO moment for them, right? Where, it's kind of like you get a bit of Cassandra complex with these things, right? Because you're like, well, if I stick my finger in the light socket, it's going to hurt. It's like, I don't know. It looks pretty tempting. I've seen it hurt a lot of people. I wouldn't do it. And some people just need to find out for themselves. And if you own your business, you can just pull up the news every day and see a person baffling themselves because they didn't do it quickly or diligently. And so people should really take caution, especially if they're not really understanding the use of the technology or what it's giving you.
So, what I've heard continuously over the podcast and the feedback here is that it always goes back to the cost savings. Is that what you're also seeing in your industry? Because
Oh
what
yeah.
you just mentioned with the bank and going overseas, like that's a common thing that's been happening. People are trying to outsource things overseas to save money, but to what cost? Does it end up being more expensive in the long run? What is your thought on that?
Well, I definitely think there's two competing ideologies. One is like the sunk cost fallacy of like, wow, we spent a lot of money in AI investment and this thing has to ship, or all that's going to be dumb. And then there's the, wow, we're not spending enough in AI investment. We're falling behind our competitors. And then there's like, we have to be a competitive employer for people and give them the AI tools that people are craving for and all that. And so all of this is really great for salespeople to launch stuff. But the one commonality I see between my Fortune 5s and my Fortune 5,000s is people don't understand what people do all day with their time at a company. And so they think like, oh, this guy's just answering phones all day, so I can have a robot do that. But they don't see like a person like applying the problem solving, and this person may be at the company for 30 years and they know, oh, this is a very specific problem. I have to call George at extension 42 because he's the only one who can unfuck this. And so if you want to operationalize George into a product, if it's something that George requires, like if George could get in trouble if he does it wrong, you shouldn't automate it. And if George is, it's just a switch he flips, you should absolutely automate it and find things for George to do that are more useful of his talents. And I think that's the tension. Everyone has a person on speed dial at a company that's like, Maria, where's the 442 form? Help me do
Yep.
this or whatever. It's like, I'm not your Google. And so that's the automation opportunity. But then there's like, Maria, I got a problem. I have X, Y, and Z, and they're coming together in a way I've never seen before. Have you? It's like, yes, I have. It was 14 years ago, and here's what we did. And guess what? It still applies today. And I think that is kind of like the automation patterns. One, they're not super sexy, right? They're not like saying, I've had people who have internal HR contact centers that are bigger than Medicare in 13 states just for their employees. And they're like, we need to fully automate this contact center in 90 days. And I'm just like, why? Is it because you don't have enough people, or people are waiting in line too long? And the answer we found for them was half the phone calls were them verifying who they were because they called one contact center that did that and transferred to another contact center that didn't have integration to the first contact center. So they had to do it again. So it doubled the length of the phone call. So the $5 was $10. And so if you just like cut the second call in half, that is 250 times 200 times 200 times a day that you save without changing the way people work. And I think those are kind of solutions people should be thinking about for AI. It's like, yeah, I'm copying and pasting an email into a spreadsheet, then taking the spreadsheet, uploading it to a Salesforce, and then I go to the meeting and I take the meeting notes and I copy into Salesforce. Like that is like, so an hour phone call is generating 45 minutes of before and after work. Why don't you automate that 45 minutes? And then you could spend your meeting like I am talking to you and not taking notes and copying, pasting things and making sure that you're ready to hydrate the system later.
Right. So when your company comes in, are people calling you because they've tried to fix solutions themselves and implement AI and it's gone sideways? Or are companies being more proactive these days and
Mm.
calling you to strategize first or get the feedback before they're implementing?
We do a lot of both. I find a lot of value in like sometimes you do a project and its failure is what teaches you how to do it right the next time. And so a lot of like ISVs, they come in and they'll just first thing to do is delete everything that happened before and start fresh. And to me, I think that's a valuable post-mortem exercise, like your bones, the ME. You're like, huh, this person apparently clubbed themselves in the face for their own hubris and and caused themselves to perish and whatever, all that stuff. And so, but look what they did. They categorized all the problems into this list. So, okay, we're already a week ahead of schedule because we already have the problem set defined. So let's take that. And it's like, here's where they messed up. They concatenated these four problems into one thing when they're clearly separate concerns. And so, what if we just like diverge that part out? And then, how do we make this failure thing? Can we turn that into a POC? Can we
Yeah.
find the thorn in the lion's paw, pull it out, and it's like, hey, the lion's hat is pretty good. And then you can change the discussion to, okay, we're now in week 8 of the project in week 1. What did you really want? And then find
Yeah.
out like, yeah, maybe they misunderstood or maybe their goals changed. But I think a lot of times people come to me with problems that are like 8 steps down the road. When if you go back to the fork in the road, you're like, what did you want? It's like, oh, I wanted this, or I wanted that. It's like, oh, then we'll just do that then and not make 8 steps to get to where you want to be. Like, and I think that addition through subtraction is very scary for a lot of people because then you're like telling your bosses, like, oh, yeah, our ideas last year were done, we threw it away. But like you didn't throw it away, you learned the data from it, and now you're making a more leaner, more agile machine. And so there's that constant tension of like, oh, he's just throwing everything away. It's like, well, it's still called the dingle hopper and it's still doing what it does. It's just when you look it up, there's just one little mouse in the mouse wheel and not like a huge mousetrap thing that will fall apart that no one understands how it works. And I think a lot of my software problems are like that with my clients.
Well, that sounds good. That's now to me, hearing you talk, that goes back to some fundamental leadership methodologies, the debrief, the post-op, what you've learned, those lessons learned from that exercise. As a project manager, obviously that's what we do. We beat it to death. But when it comes to systems, what I'm hearing is that maybe that's not always the case when it comes to strategizing how you automate processes. So it sounds like you actually come into a company, work with them, and take that leadership component of
Yeah.
debriefing, post-oping, lessons learned, and actually benefit from some of the failures to
Hmm.
build on those instead of start from the very beginning. I've
Right.
seen this in my career as well, working with the government. I often came in to build a brand new system, managed to build one from the ground up, a custom system from the ground up. And what I found was 6 systems existed before mine, and they all had one error. They had
Hmm.
fired everyone who built it. So they're just going to build a new one. Okay,
Mm.
that's very wasteful, and all those people are gone. So before we build any more systems, we're taking like 6 to 12 months to strategize what is the concept. Then we will build the system. And then before we do this, we're going to commit to an after action plan. Who will you keep on? You will keep someone on staff, or you will train a government personnel to know how this functions, hire an IT person. Because when the error pops up and you fired everybody, you're going to start again and waste millions of dollars building system after system after system. But I never got a debrief. So I
Yeah.
I never did. that debrief is so essential to the time and the cost savings.
And that's really like a fundamental benefit, I think, of AI that, and you always got to take AI with a grain of salt, but you can tell AI, okay, here is SOW, and here's the platform they
Yes.
used. How would you have built it? And then you can see how they built it. And like, if they've just gone left here instead of right, they would have got it. And
Yep.
so, I mean, I'm happy to tell a customer, hey, I know we SOW'd for this amount of money, but if you did this 2 hours of work, this prototype would work. Do you want to see how that works? And maybe we change the project into the next phase of what you envisioned when it didn't work. And so that's hard, right? Because then we're talking about contract stuff and all that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I think like we saw a lot last year with the Doge stuff. Like they came in and they did what I just did, and they took it as verbatim truth. The reason we do this is because we have 9 underlying systems that were made in the 50 various states, of which there's this Venn diagram of consensus, one way of doing it, and this Venn diagram of consensus, the other way of doing it, and we have to reconcile them at the federal level. And I think a lot of problems like that, even between organizations of 1, 2, 3 people, or where it's Janie gave it to me as an Excel, so now I have to copy the Excel onto Salesforce. But maybe why does Janie like Excel and not like Salesforce? And if you can use uh, a minute of AI to like make that experience possible in the native thing, and we can get rid of the spreadsheet, why not? And I think like there's a lot of like, you know, the little girl in the taco commercial saying why not both kind of things that happen,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of things are preference over process, and a lot of things that are comfortable are a coin flip one way or the other. So you just do what the group likes to do, and the computer can do the transformation into the efficient way of doing it.
Yeah, and now that you said that, I love all your analogies. They really bring to light the main point, the main idea. I would like to get your perspective on this. So there are two very different types of clients. There's the client that hires you because they think they know exactly what they want, and they have a whole thing that they want to implement, the whole process, and they hire you and say, "Hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and I just want you to do it and implement it, and we're going to run from there." They're very, I would say, close-minded to what you're talking about. Client B says, well, this is my process, but I'm open to suggestions. How does the outcome compare? You've worked with tons of clients. So how do you see the differences between client A
Yeah.
that's pretty stuck in their ways, they want you to implement, and then you probably do to some capacity, just follow what they want, and then client B who wants to say, hey, Peter, here's what I'm thinking, but I'm open to suggestions. Like, how do those outcomes compare?
Yeah. I so this is going to be kind of a navel gaze philosophical question. So keep me on
Right,
track. So
right.
like bad bosses make bad processes. And when I say a bad boss makes a bad process, there's bosses that say, I don't care how you do it, get it done, and actually care very deeply how you do it and how it's done,
Mm,
and will question the process that did the outcome and not trust the output. And so it either you delegate responsibility to a person and they do it and you accept the work as being good because you trust them, or you don't trust them. And so then work invents all sorts of sub processes to like, okay, we have to do a spec and we have to do a design review and we have to have legal compliance, blah, blah, blah. And so those are what adds the complexity of the process. And it isn't not even at the problem solving side. So that's just like the container of how you solve problems. And then the other half of the problem is the person not knowing how it works and then assuming the scenario they want is just a choice and doesn't come through hard work and determination and validation, and doesn't understand why you can't see what they see. I do a lot of analogies, but I always think about like Michael Jordan, the player, one of the greatest NBA players of all time, such a bad coach, such a terrible coach and a GM and all that stuff is because when you think at a level, and CEOs have to think at a level to operate at the level they work at, it is very hard to put yourself in the shoes of boots on the ground and troops and your chain of command and understanding like, oh yeah, I can clearly see that we got to cross the Rubicon to get to where we're going, and we just got to cross it. But you're just like, can't cross the Rubicon? That's crazy. You know what that means? And they don't care because they're CEO and they got to carry the vision for it. But the people on the ground who do the logistics, like, are gonna have to prepare for the implications of crossing the Rubicon. And so all that kind of boils down to what comes out at the end of your process. And so there's an austerity that happens. So it's like, okay, we have to ship this by October. And you're like, okay, yeah. And then CEO goes out and does sales meetings like, we got to add 19 other features. It's like, and still the same date. I'm like, yeah, there
No.
goes accessibility, there goes unit testing, and all the things that are not in the package. And people wonder why things ship and then immediately come out with a bug fix a week later because they probably shipped at 1.0 minutes before the on stage moment. And then they quickly shipped the fixes that everyone was reporting because they had to cut things so thin. And I think everything you see with AI slop and the way the tech industry now is part of this kind of like mindset system. This is the hardest lesson I teach my clients is like, okay, you save all this time with AI. What are you going to do with your time? You shouldn't ship faster. You should go back and ship node as actually a gold standard 1.0. You know, you should have all the tests and make sure everything is healthy and you do everything you set out to do and you think everything's great and people have tried it and they're happy with it. Let's take that time and reinvest it in the process versus like launching 7 other ships to distant
Yeah.
lands at the same time. So
I agree. No, that's a great way to summarize that. Um, I like to leave with one like just really like out of the box question. So if if you can give one piece of advice to leaders direct when it comes to their processes and choosing AI and choosing systems, what would be one piece of advice that they can leave here with today to make them better?
yeah, I think the biggest advice about AI is that anything you rent, you don't own. And so if you're building a system and you have access to employees and expertise on staff and you're delegating that to API from a vendor, you're paying rent for expertise now. And they can change the rent and maybe the price that it's sold at today is not the price it's going to be next year because they're selling at a loss, hoping that, just like Amazon, like, I remember when Amazon sold books and then they had Toys R Us on Amazon.com and 2 years later, no more Toys R Us, right? Because all these storefronts went to a storefront and they learned how you thought and then they ate your lunch. And so I think expertise is pretty much in information technology, your expertise is your line of business. And so you need to really protect your assets and your IPs and your people who make stuff happen.
That's a great answer. In order to do that, I would hire out for that, essentially,
Yeah, yeah,
to the experts, to make sure I protect my business. So in this case, where can people find you if they're looking for your services? Because I'm sure it's in high demand right
sure.
now.
Sure. You can reach us at our website, toilville.com. We have a vanity URL called peoplemakeitbetter.com because it's something we really believe. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Blue Sky, and I'm on email. So I answer all my emails myself. You won't get a canned robot response. So any questions, no matter how small, feel free to send them my way.
Oh, I love that. Well, Peter, thank you so much for your insight today. It was really fun talking to you, and I learned a ton. I barely talked. I was just taking it in. I love your analogies.
Yeah.
You make your points very clearly, and I think that's a huge plus with you, and I'm sure with the clients you work with. So, thanks again for your time, and to our listeners, thanks again for listening to Future Proof, the Future Proof podcast, and we'll see you next time.